Kirby's Adventure was released on March 23rd of 1993, making it a late-release NES title. It's the second game in the main series of Kirby games and was a follow-up to Kirby's Dream Land on the Game Boy. Kirby's Adventure is the first Kirby game on a home console, and it's also the first game in the series to have an appearance from Meta Knight. The game's plot takes place after Kirby wakes up from a nap without having any dreams. He heads to the Fountain of Dreams to investigate and discovers that King DDD has stolen the Star Rod from the fountain and has broken the Star Rod into pieces, giving them to each of the game's bosses. Kirby decides to find the fragments to restore the dreams of everyone in Dreamland. The game is a side-scrolling platformer with very little platforming. You have the ability to float and eat enemies like in Kirby's Dream Land, but in Kirby's Adventure it introduces the ability to eat enemies and steal their powers, which is referred to as the copy ability. This is probably the main mechanic that the game focuses on, and it's a pretty awesome one. The game features 26 different copy abilities ranging from using a hammer or sword to more unconventional ones like the UFO ability, which allows you to fly around and shoot lasers. In Kirby's Adventure you have a life bar, and whenever you take a hit, you lose one of your 6 life. And if you have a copy ability, you'll lose it by having it shoot out of your back in the form of a star. You can reacquire the ability by eating the star, however. The game features 8 worlds with a varying number of levels in each, usually 4 to 5. Each of these levels also contain mini-games that award you points or 1-ups for completing them correctly. A few examples of these mini-games include a crane game where you pick up Kirby's in a pit and it will give you extra lives, or an egg-catching game where you have to open your mouth for eggs but close it for bombs that King DDD throws. The majority of the main levels are pretty straightforward, with some bonus areas that can be uncovered by having certain copy abilities equipped on certain levels. There's occasionally mini-bosses on some levels, and after defeating them you're able to obtain more powerful copy abilities than the ones you'd get from normal enemies. At the end of each world there's a boss fight, some of which are recycled from Kirby's Dream Land, but there's also a few new ones. The boss fights stand out as some of the best parts of the game, as they're probably the most challenging things in the game. As with most Kirby games, the game has an extremely easy difficulty and can easily be beaten by anyone. This Kirby game actually feels easier than the original because of the copy abilities, because certain ones are extremely powerful and can pretty much take out all the enemies and bosses really easily. A remake of Kirby's Adventure was released for the Game Boy Advance on December 2nd of 2002 called Kirby, Nightmare in Dreamland. Aside from the graphical updates, the best thing about Nightmare in Dreamland is that it removes the massive slowdowns that Kirby's Adventure has. The game also features new minigames, multiplayer, and some gameplay tweaks, as well as a new mode that allows you to speedrun the game as Meta Knight. The graphics in Kirby's Adventure are amazing. Because the game was released late in the NES's life cycle, programmers and art designers really knew how to squeeze the most out of a game, and because of this, Kirby's Adventure has some of the best graphics on the NES. However, many of the late-release NES titles that have much better graphics than the early releases did have issues with slowdown because of the graphical levels. Other examples of NES games with great graphics and massive slowdowns could include Contra Force or Bubble Bobble Part 2. Most of the time, Kirby's Adventure runs okay with minimal slowdown, but certain attacks that enemies do and their copy abilities can cause the game to drastically drop frame rates and slow down. This is a major issue with the beam attack and freeze attacks, which cause the game to have extreme slowdown whenever they're used. The music's upbeat and exactly what you'd expect in a Kirby game. The majority of the levels have laid-back tunes with kind of a tropical vibe to them, which sound really good. The boss fight music is fast-paced and really fit the mood of the battles. The music in this game unfortunately does experience a bit of choppiness when the game lags due to too many sprites on the screen. Overall, Kirby's Adventure is among the best titles on the NES. The game is visually stunning for an NES game, boasting some of the cleanest and best graphics on the system. The gameplay also takes the Kirby series to a next level by including the copy ability, which would completely change the nature of Kirby games for every future entry in the series. Kirby's Adventure is still going for under $20 according to PriceCharting.com, and given its late release in 1993, it's probably one of the more affordable late-released NES titles out there. If you've never played the game, you should, but the real question is which version should you play, Adventure on the NES or Nightmare on the Game Boy Advance? Personally, I prefer the NES version, but the slowdown the game experiences with some of the abilities and enemies on the screen does hurt the game. This is why I think I'd actually recommend the Game Boy Advance version of the game with its updated visuals and fluid gameplay. Despite having worse minigames compared to the original title, the Game Boy Advance version's lack of lag makes it really win between the two versions overall.